night everything changed, nobody expected James Harden's offseason to begin like this. Not Cavaliers fans, not NBA insiders, not even the people closest to him. Because just when everyone thought Harden was preparing to secure one final massive payday and lead Cleveland back into championship contention, a shocking headline exploded across the basketball world. James Harden arrested in Houston. In a matter of hours, the conversation shifted from contract extensions and championship aspirations to police reports, court dates, and questions that suddenly had no easy answers. How does a future Hall of Famer end up in handcuffs? How does a player reportedly preparing to turn down over $42 million to pursue long-term security suddenly find himself facing criminal charges? And perhaps the biggest question of all, could one late-night mistake change the final chapter of one of the greatest careers of this generation? Because this isn't just another celebrity headline. This is James Harden, the former MVP, the 11-time All-Star, the man who transformed Houston basketball into must-see television, the player who reinvented offensive basketball with the step-back three, the superstar Cleveland gambled on to help bring another championship banner to the city. And now, he's at the center of a controversy nobody saw coming. According to reports, the incident unfolded during the early morning hours in Houston. What initially appeared to be a routine police interaction quickly spiraled into something much bigger. Before sunrise, Harden had been booked into custody. By breakfast, social media had exploded. By lunchtime, fans across America were asking the same question: what happens next? Will the NBA launch an investigation? Will Cleveland reconsider its commitment? Will this affect the massive contract negotiations that were already hanging in the balance? Or will this ultimately become just another storm that one of basketball's most polarizing stars manages to survive? The truth is, this story isn't really about a weapon, it's about timing. It's about reputation. It's about how quickly years of greatness can collide with one unexpected moment. For James Harden, everything was supposed to be falling into place. Instead, everything suddenly feels uncertain. And what happens over the next few weeks could determine not only where he plays next season, but how fans remember the final act of his legendary career. Before we dive deeper, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments below so we can see how global this NBA community really is. And here's today's question. If you believe this incident won't impact Harden's future with Cleveland, press 1" the comments. If you think this changes everything and the Cavaliers should move on, press 2. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the conversation because this story is only getting started. The Houston stop? The story began in Houston before sunrise, in the kind of hour where one bad decision can become a national headline. Harden was reportedly moving with a group of vehicles when police stopped one car in the convoy. His vehicle was not the original target, but when he pulled up behind the stop, the entire situation changed. An officer noticed a handgun inside Harden's vehicle. The issue was not simply that the firearm existed. In Texas, ownership and carry laws are specific, and one detail became the center of everything. The weapon was allegedly not properly secured in a holster. That single detail turned a late-night encounter into an arrest. Harden did not run from the moment. According to the report, he acknowledged the firearm belonged to him. That admission made the case official. Suddenly, this was no longer a rumor floating around NBA circles. It was a court record, a booking, a charge, and a story moving faster than any defense could control. The bond was small, the headline was enormous. For an average person, this might have stayed local, but James Harden is not average. He is a former MVP with millions of fans, millions of critics, and a contract situation worth tens of millions of dollars. Every detail matters. The time of night matters. The location matters. The weapon matters. The timing matters even more. Because this did not happen in the middle of a quiet career. It happened while Cleveland was deciding whether Harden was still part of its future. Why Houston makes this bigger? To understand why this story exploded so quickly, you have to understand what Houston means to James Harden. Houston was not just another stop in his career. Houston was where he became James Harden. Before the beard became a symbol, before the step-back three became one of the most feared moves in basketball, before defenders started reaching in panic and fans started debating his legacy every night, Harden arrived in Texas as a rising star looking for his own team. And he found it. For nearly a decade, Houston belonged to him. The Rockets built around his rhythm, his isolation game, his creativity, and his ability to turn an ordinary possession into a highlight. He became an MVP there. He became a scoring champion there. He became one of the most unstoppable offensive players the league had ever seen. That is why this arrest feels different. It did not happen in a random city where Harden was passing through. It happened in the place most connected to his identity. The city that once celebrated him now became the setting for one of the most uncomfortable headlines of his career. There is something almost cinematic about it. The same streets that once cheered him now became the backdrop for flashing lights, police reports, and unanswered questions. Houston made him larger than life. Now Houston has placed him under a microscope, and for a player trying to write one final winning chapter, that is a dangerous place to be. Cleveland's gamble. When the Cavaliers brought in Harden, the move was never small. Cleveland was not just adding a veteran scorer. They were making a statement. They were saying that Donovan Mitchell needed another creator, another closer, another name powerful enough to scare the Eastern Conference. For a while, the gamble looked smart. Harden gave Cleveland control. He gave them pace. He gave them a second elite playmaker who could calm the offense when games got tight. His numbers showed that he still had real value. He was not the same explosive force from his Houston prime, but he was still dangerous, still crafty, still capable of bending defenses with one dribble. Then the playoffs exposed the other side of the conversation. Against New York, Harden struggled. His shooting dropped. His defense became a target. The Cavaliers reached a stage they had not seen in years, but they did not finish like a true contender. They were swept, and that kind of ending leaves scars. Before the arrest, Cleveland already had questions. Was Harden still worth a major deal? Could he hold up through another deep playoff run? Was he the missing piece, or just a short-term solution with a famous name? The arrest did not create those doubts. It simply made them louder. The money now feels different. Before this incident, Harden's future seemed to be moving toward one obvious path. He had a massive player option on the table. He could take the money, play one more season, and keep control. But reports suggested he was expected to decline that option and pursue a longer agreement with Cleveland. That meant trust. That meant commitment. That meant both sides believed there was still something worth building. Then came the arrest. Now, every number feels different. A 2-year deal worth tens of millions is not just about basketball anymore. It is about risk. It is about optics. It is about whether a front office wants to attach itself to a veteran star with an open legal issue, even if the charge is not the most severe. For Harden, the timing could not be worse. At 36, leverage is fragile. Teams do not pay older guards only for what they once were. They pay for what they believe those players can still deliver. One bad playoff series already gave Cleveland the reason to negotiate harder. One off-court headline gave them another. That does not mean Harden is finished. It does mean the conversation has changed. The Cavaliers can now pause. They can wait. They can ask for protection in the deal. They can lower the offer. They can use uncertainty as leverage. And in the NBA, leverage is everything. The league's silent. The NBA's silence may be the loudest part of this entire story. When something like this happens, fans expect an immediate statement. They expect punishment, outrage, or at least a clear direction. But the league often moves differently. Adam Silver and the league office usually wait for facts, legal documents, and internal review before making any major decision. That silence does not mean the NBA is ignoring it. It means the league is watching, and that is dangerous in its own way. The NBA does not need a criminal conviction to act. The commissioner has broad power when a player's conduct could damage the image of the league. That is what makes this situation so delicate. Harden may avoid serious legal consequences, but still face questions from the league office. The difference here is context. This was not a locker room confrontation. It was not a threat toward another player. It did not happen inside an NBA facility. Based on the known details, this appears to be a legal issue centered on how a firearm was carried inside a vehicle. That distinction mattered, but public image also mattered. The NBA has spent years protecting its brand. A gun-related arrest involving a former MVP is not something the league can simply pretend did not happen. Even if the punishment is small, the review itself can create pressure. And pressure is exactly what Harden does not need right now. The shadow of past NBA cases. Every time an NBA player is connected to a weapon-related incident, the league does not look at it as an isolated headline. It looks backward. It remembers history. It remembers the names, the suspensions, the press conferences, the damage control, and the careers that never looked the same again. And whether James Harden wants it or not, his name is now being pulled into that same uncomfortable conversation. The first name that always comes back is Gilbert Arenas. That case still sits in NBA history like a warning sign nobody inside the league office can ignore. Arenas was not a bench player. He was not a minor name. He was one of the most electric guards in basketball. A showman, a scorer, a personality, a player fans loved because he made the game feel unpredictable. Then one incident involving weapons inside an NBA locker room changed everything. The league reacted with force. The punishment was massive, the image damage was even worse, and the message became clear. When weapons and the NBA brand collide, the league will protect the league first. That is the shadow hanging over Harden now. But here is where the story becomes more complicated. Harden's situation is not the same as Arenas. Based on the current details, This did not happen inside a locker room. It did not happen during a team confrontation. There was no report of a threat toward another player, coach, fan, or staff member. It was not an NBA facility. It was not a team flight. It was not a practice center. It was a vehicle in Houston. It was a firearm allegedly visible and not properly secured. That difference matters legally. That difference matters morally. That difference should matter when people judge the case, but public perception is rarely patient enough to separate details. To many fans, the words NBA star arrested and gun charge are already enough to trigger a reaction. Some people will immediately assume the worst. Others will defend Harden before knowing the full situation. Social media does not wait for court dates. It does not wait for league review. It creates a verdict in minutes and then forces the athlete to live inside that verdict. That is why this is so dangerous for Harden. He is not only fighting a legal issue, he is fighting a comparison. He is fighting memory. He is fighting the league's fear of repeating past embarrassment. There are other cases too. Delonte West faced weapon-related legal trouble and still continued playing afterward. That example shows that an arrest does not automatically end an NBA career. Context matters. The severity matters. The player's response matters. The team's belief matters. The league's calculation matters. And that is where Harden's future becomes hard to predict. If the NBA views this as a technical legal issue with limited danger, the punishment may be small or non-existent. If the league views it as a reputational problem involving one of its most recognizable stars, the response could become more serious. Harden's advantage is that his career resume gives him power. He is not an unknown player fighting for a roster spot. He is a former MVP, a future Hall of Famer, and still a productive guard. His name has value, his talent has value, his ability to help a team win still has value. But his disadvantage is also his name. Because when a player is this famous, every mistake becomes national. A younger, lesser-known player might move through a misdemeanor case quietly. Harden cannot. His face becomes the thumbnail. His name becomes the headline. His legacy becomes the debate. And the NBA knows that. Cleveland knows that. Sponsors know that. Opposing fans know that. That is the real pressure here. Harden does not need this incident to become another Arenas-level scandal for it to hurt him. It only needs to create enough doubt, enough discomfort, enough hesitation in a front office meeting, enough concern in a league review, enough noise around his contract talk. That is how careers change in the NBA. Not always with one dramatic punishment. Sometimes they change quietly. A team offers less money. Another team walks away. A front office delays negotiations. A locker room starts asking questions. A player who once controlled the conversation suddenly becomes the subject of it. That is the dangerous intersection where Harden now stands. Not at the end of the road, but close enough to the edge that every move matters. His next statement matters. His legal team's next step matters. The NBA's next silence matters. Cleveland's next private meeting matters. Because once an athlete enters this kind of spotlight, the story no longer belongs only to him. Cleveland's real decision. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, this is no longer a simple basketball decision. Before the arrest, the conversation was already difficult. Harden was productive, but aging. Valuable, but expensive. Brilliant with the ball, but vulnerable without it. He helped Cleveland reach a place the franchise had not seen in years. But when the lights became brightest, the ending was brutal. Now the Cavaliers must decide what that means. Do they judge Harden by the regular season version who stabilized the offense and made Donovan Mitchell's life easier? Or do they judge him by the playoff version who struggled against New York, got targeted defensively, and looked like a player whose best years may finally be behind him? That question was hard enough. The arrest makes it harder. Cleveland's front office cannot afford to make this decision emotionally. They are not building a documentary, they are building a roster. And every roster decision now comes with salary cap pressure, luxury tax consequences, second apron restrictions, fan expectations, and a narrow championship window. Donovan Mitchell is the franchise cornerstone. Everything starts there. The Cavaliers must ask themselves whether Harden makes Mitchell's future in Cleveland more secure or more complicated. If Harden helps Cleveland win now, keeping him makes sense. If Harden limits flexibility, blocks younger development, and adds off-court uncertainty, then the price becomes dangerous. That is the cold reality of NBA business. Teams may talk about loyalty in public, but behind closed doors, they talk about risk. How many years? How much guaranteed money? What protections can be built into the deal? What happens if the legal case stretches longer than expected? What happens if the NBA launches an investigation? What happens if another headline appears? What happens if the fan base turns? Those are not dramatic questions. They are practical ones, and they are exactly the type of questions a responsible front office has to ask before committing tens of millions of dollars. The Cavaliers also have to think about the locker room. Harden is a huge personality. He has been the center of franchises before. He has played with superstars. He has forced trades. He has carried teams. He has frustrated teams. His history is complex because his talent is enormous and his presence is never small. In Cleveland, the balance was working because he was useful. He gave the Cavaliers something they needed. Another creator, another shot maker, another veteran who had seen playoff pressure before. He helped them believe they were closer than people thought. But after the New York sweep, belief became more fragile. The Knicks did not just beat Cleveland. They exposed Cleveland. They attacked matchups. They forced the Cavaliers to confront weaknesses that regular season success can sometimes hide, and Harden was part of that problem. So now Cleveland has two versions of James Harden in front of them. Version 1 is the genius playmaker who can still produce 2-0+ points, control tempo, and make a contender more dangerous. Version 2 is the aging guard with declining defensive value, playoff inconsistency, a major contract expectation, and now an open legal issue attached to his name. The Cavaliers must decide which version is more real. The public statement will always sound calm. Teams say they are gathering information. They say they are monitoring the situation. They say they are in contact with the player and his representatives. That language is designed to avoid panic. But privately, every word changing. Maybe the Cavaliers still want Harden, but at a lower number. Maybe they still want him, but for fewer years. Maybe they want to wait until the court process becomes clearer. Maybe they want to see whether the NBA acts first. Maybe they want Harden back, but no longer on Harden's terms. That is where the power shift begins. Before the arrest, Harden could argue that Cleveland needed him. He could point to the Eastern Conference Finals run. He could point to his production. He could point to the lack of available stars. He could say, "You traded for me because you believed I was the missing piece." Now Cleveland can answer, "We still value you, but the situation has changed." That sentence can cost a player millions, and Harden knows it. At this stage of his career, he is not only negotiating against Cleveland, he is negotiating against age, playoff reputation, salary cap math, and now uncertainty. That is a brutal combination for any player, even one with his resume. Still, walking away from Harden is not easy. Elite creation is rare. Veteran shot making is rare. Players who can run offense in high pressure moments are rare. Cleveland cannot simply replace Harden with a minimum signing and expect the same result. If they lose him, they must have a plan. And in the NBA, losing a star-level creator without a replacement can close a window quickly. That is why this decision is so dangerous. Keeping Harden could be risky. Letting him walk could be risky too. And when both choices carry danger, the front office has to choose the version of risk it can survive. The date that could change everything. June 22 now becomes the date everyone circles. For Harden, it is more than a court appearance. It is a moment that could shape how teams, fans, and the league view the entire case. If the issue moves toward a quick resolution, the story could fade. If it drags out, the pressure could grow. That uncertainty is the problem. NBA teams hate uncertainty almost as much as they hate losing. A player with a clear situation is easier to evaluate. A player with an open legal matter is harder. Every meeting becomes more cautious. Every contract discussion becomes more complicated. Every public statement becomes carefully measured. For Harden, the best outcome is clarity. He needs the legal process to move cleanly. He needs the Cavaliers to feel comfortable. He needs the NBA to avoid a harsh response. He needs fans to see this as a mistake, not a pattern. But he does not control all of that anymore. The court controls part of it. The league controls part of it. Cleveland controls part of it. And public opinion controls more than any athlete wants to admit. That is why this moment feels so fragile. Harden's talent is not in question. His resume is not in question. His place in NBA history is not in question. But his immediate future? That is suddenly very much in question. The final lesson. The James Harden story is not just about an arrest. It is about how quickly power can shift in professional sports. One week, a player can be negotiating a major contract. The next week, the same player can be waiting on a courtroom, a league office, and a front office to decide what his future looks like. That is the lesson here. Talent opens doors, but judgment keeps them open. Harden has given basketball fans years of unforgettable moments. The step-back threes, the scoring explosions, the MVP season, the Houston era, the playoff battles, the reinventions, the drama, the brilliance. His career cannot be reduced to one incident. But one incident can still change the way a career is discussed. That is the human side of this story. Athletes are not machines. They make mistakes. They carry pressure. They live under a spotlight most people will never understand. But fame also brings responsibility. When millions of people are watching, every choice becomes bigger. For Harden, the path forward should be simple but not easy. Handle the legal process with honesty. Respect the league's reveal. Rebuild trust with Cleveland. And show that this moment does not define the man or erase the player. For the Cavaliers, the lesson is strategic. Do not panic. Do not ignore the risk. Look at the facts. protect the team, and make the decision that gives the franchise the best chance to win without losing its identity. For fans, the lesson is balance. Hold stars accountable, but do not rush to destroy people before the full story is known. Basketball is better when greatness gets a chance to grow, recover, and learn. Now I want to hear from you. If you think James Harden deserves another chance with the Cavaliers, press 1" the comment. If you think Cleveland should move on and build a cleaner future around Donovan Mitchell, press 2. And if you believe the NBA should investigate before anyone judges the situation, press 3. Like the video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe for more breaking NBA stories, player drama, trade updates, and deep basketball analysis. Because in this league, one night can change everything.